Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're really pleased to have 3 members of the General Assembly, 2 from the House of Delegates, 1 from the State Senate, who represent the city of Norfolk and surrounding areas. Delegate Steve Heretick, good to see you, sir.
Good to be back, Woody. Thank you.
Delegate Joe Lindsey,
Good
welcome.
Morning. Pleasure.
Senator Lionel Spruill, good to see you, sir.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to you.
City of Norfolk, still heavily dependent on the military. You've got the Navy there.
You better believe it, and that's why it's important when it comes to that we all work together, because just not Norfolk. If the military is not there in Norfolk in some form, the Navy, for that moving out ships, what have you, if Norfolk military, the ships, and the Navy leave, all the surrounding city will suffer. And that's why when it comes to that, there's no Republicans or Democrats. We're all on one accord, because we know what will be at stake if we don't work with the U.S. senators and the congressmen and say, hey, make sure that y'all will hold that thing together to keep the Navy strong and the military strong in Hampton Roads.
And Delegate Lindsey, the second largest employer in the Norfolk area, as I understand it, is the Port of Virginia.
Absolutely, and we've got to do what we can to make that corridor deeper and wider, so that we're competitive with Savannah and New York, because we've got a natural resource that we absolutely have to take full advantage of.
And of course, there's a lot of private industry there. There's been a lot of development. You have light rail there now, but you had, at least in 2013, I think, 5 Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah, and Hampton Roads continues to attract at least a lot of interest in economic development. I think that we're always going to be challenged by our transportation infrastructure. As you've seen, Woody, in terms of light rail, the ability to take light rail and extend it up to the Navy base or out to Virginia Beach are always challenged by the geography we have. And I think going forward, that's one of the challenges that we're all going to be facing in Hampton Roads, is making sure that we have the transportation infrastructure and, by the way, the communications infrastructure to support businesses as they want to come to Hampton Roads.
And of course, you've got Old Dominion University, you've got Norfolk State, and you have a College of Medicine there as well.
And that's good for us, because we have 2 fine universities and College of Medicine. That's why it behooves us to make sure that during the budget process, we make sure that that our institution in Hampton Roads get their fair share, because of those institutions, especially the hospital there. I call it the hospital, the medical part of it. That is very important for us, and we think that our members of the Appropriation and Finance and the Senate side, if they would really keep an eye on that and make sure that we get what we need, because it's Hampton Roads, those 2 schools, and that medical school is vital help to us.
And Delegate Lindsey, you serve on the Commerce and Labor Committee, among others, but there has been some fairly contentious legislation this year that has been under consideration both on the House and the Senate side. It deals with electric utility regulation. What's going on there?
Sure, that's the Dominion rate freeze bill. Just to encapsulate it into short terms, it's really about whether or not we allow greater governance to this process of a rate freeze, and there's a lot of review going on right now as to what terms we should attach to it, especially as it relates to at what point profits should be refunded back to the taxpayers. I'm sorry, to the ratepayers. Yes.
And you serve on that same committee,
Right.
and of course this rate freeze I think took effect back in 2015.
Right, you know, I wasn't here at the time. I think, you know, in trying to put myself into those shoes, I think that the arguments were at least favorable in terms of doing that at the time, but I think, you know, we learn as we go. And I think that the deal that the governor has tried to put together with the stakeholders, Dominion Power, and, you know, all the ratepayer, you know, groups, environmental groups, has really tried to do the best job anybody can in terms of focusing what's really important, to try to give back to the ratepayers excess profits that Dominion has taken over the years, to try to put the State Corporation Commission back, you know, in the driver's seat in terms of overseeing Dominion and the rates it assesses. And more importantly, I think, in terms of helping to facilitate renewable energy sources and production in Virginia. This bill is a very, very large bill. I think there's a lot to like in it. Sometimes there's things not to like in it. But I can tell you what, at least in my opinion, this is probably going to be the largest bill we see certainly this year and probably in the next 5 years. This is a huge bill for everybody.
So where is it in the Senate now, Senator?
Well, in the Senate, yesterday it came out the Commerce and Labor 11-4, I believe, 10-4. And what happened, the concern, that the good part about it is this. Let's say, for example, right now, if your lights go out, or the whole neighborhood because of a storm, someone has to call Dominion. What they got this grid system, they're going to change the meter system, that they would know right off the bat, hey, the house at 593 line, the question is lights are out. You won't have to call them. That's one good part about it. But my concern was that yesterday was that why would the taxpayers have to put the money up front? I believe, and I questioned them about the stockholder, I believe that they have enough assets that they can take their money now, do what they got to do. But always during the wait time, they use our money to do that. And they were saying this will only last 10, 12 years. I said, name one time, had the utilities always said to us, is until we get all this thing paid for, and then we will stop. I looked to name one time has it ever stopped. We don't know about that. But I do agree that my argument with them on the floor yesterday and the committee was Maryland and others have the same system that, and they did not charge all that money. At least charge the meter, this new meter they can use. It's $195. I said, now you can take that meter and put it into the grid overall. You would have paid for it 20 times. Let me pay for it one time. Don't put that part of it, but that's part of the process. But the governor backs it and all, and they seem to think that it's something new that we can use. The governor favored it, so I had to swallow the pill, and I support it, but there would be a substitute to make some change to it. So what they are saying is right, that we got to protect the customer. You pay for it, but how much, and when will it stop?
So I take it that your fundamental beef relates to whether shareholders should take more of the risk versus the ratepayers.
You better believe it. Yes, sir. And that's really important. So that's how it got out, but it would have a hard time. We thought sure it would die. But because you had the Republicans, Wagner, and the Senator Sasslaw, Democrat, they put a compromise bill together, and Dick Sasslaw was sitting at the back of me. He was saying, Spruill, come on, you know, you got to see that. So I swallowed the pie, so I have to get it out. But I said, but on the floor, I'm not going to promise you unless I see the substitute.
Delegate Lindsey, lots of changes in your chamber, 19 new members of the House of Delegates, and I'm sure you predicted that. Many transparency changes. Talk to us about those.
Yeah, we went from having 34 Democratic members to now having 49. We're virtually, parity in sight. This is a situation where there's great opportunity for certain legislation that in the past never would have seen the light of day, such as the larceny threshold. I think that we now have a very good chance of getting that through so that right now a felony becomes a felony because you've stolen something that has a value or you've damaged something that has a value of more than $200.
$200. How long ago has it been since that bill was law? I mean, it's been a long time.
Late 80s, early 1990s. I think it was 1986, if I remember correctly.
So inflation alone would have brought that up, so to speak.
You're talking about a college kid doing something dumb like busting a mirror on a car. He gets mad at someone, and he's now facing a felony versus, what ordinarily in most states, in 38 out of 50 states, would be a misdemeanor. So we think we've got a real good shot. I put legislation in to get it to $500. That probably still, if we're talking about cost of living, below what cost of living should have in the way of an outcome. But I just believe that it's a piece of legislation this time has come. You've also got the situation now where Medicaid expansion would have never even been a real talking point last year before. I believe that, well, I know now that both sides see that the polling numbers suggest that 93% of Americans believe that Medicaid expansion, 93% of Virginians believe that Medicaid expansion is appropriate, and especially in light of the fact that our tax dollars are going to other states and funding other state initiatives. We now have that as something that's very much in sight, when that never has been the case in the time I've been here.
And of course, that Medicaid solution may require the adoption of a work requirement by way of a waiver from Health and Human Services at the federal level.
And that's still being discussed, as I understand, between the Speaker and his Republican leadership in the governor's office. I mean, we haven't seen specifics about that just yet. I know that certain states have imputed work requirements for Medicaid eligibility, and I think there are many of us who are very hesitant to really think about doing that. But nevertheless, we have the opportunity this year to bring health care to 400,000 Virginians. And these are folks, Woody, that I think we would refer to as the working poor. These are folks who have the minimum wage to like a $10, $11 an hour job, sometimes multiple jobs, that don't carry health benefits with them. They make, not quite enough money to buy health care in their own right. And this is the niche. This is the crack in the system that we're trying to fill. Now, if the Republicans want to make it a reasonable work requirement, and allow, for example, if I'm staying home to care for, my parents, my children, if there's a circumstance where I'm not able to enter the workforce, I think we need to account for that. But by the same token, we're talking in broad generalities, at least between the Speaker and the Governor, and until we see something, in the actual language itself, it's impossible to know where this is going to end up.
Where's the Senate on Medicaid? There was a dust-up a few weeks ago with Senator Stanley.
It died in the Senate 9-7.
Oh, it did?
I'll tell you what happened. I mean, that bill.
Yes.
But it's coming back. What happened with Senator Stanley was the hospital refused to take the money. Okay. But they said a 25-bed hospital would end up being a 12-bed hospital. And so what happened was, so the Democrats said, hey, we went to him and said, hey, listen, we need your vote on the Medicaid thing. He said, no. We say, had your hospital taken the money, along with Chesapeake, had you taken the money, you won't be in this fix now. So what we did was that it needed 2/3 votes. They had enough to pass it for July 1, for 21, but they need it right now. They need 2/3 votes, and we didn't give it to him. So he got hot and said some things, but he came back and apologized. That what we all do. But then the next day, we don't know how, but another bill was put in the next day. We don't know how can you do that. Put another bill in for the exact same thing, and we got it out. But my beef with this, as far as the work release, what the Speaker of the House is trying to, it's money already, it's free money. If I'm not correct, it's free money. So if we talking about what, $5 million a week or day, whatever it is, it's free money. So why are you going to require a work program for anybody to get something that we can get free anywhere from Virginia? Look how much money we have lost all these minutes since Terry was governor. We have lost because they didn't do it. You see, so the key is this. So I'm trying to figure out, why do I have to, if I need insurance, don't have insurance, but one of the criteria that you can use that I have a job to get money that's already free as far as health insurance.
And I think you have Senator Emmett Hanger, who's a Republican, who's been supportive of expansion of Medicaid, at least in the Senate.
Yes, and he was joking me about getting beat up sometimes. The Democrats, the thing that I would say, he said, don't feel bad, Spruill. He said, I'm with you on it. It's the right thing to do. He said, sometimes you got to step away from part of what's right. He said, that should not be any clause on that. that's money that Virginia are losing right now. We said we need that. And he said, so as long as it's right, I'm going to vote for it. And he stood with us on that. But like I say, but now we're going to wait and see. Our savior now is that because the House picked up so many seats on the House, and so we're waiting for that to come over to us. So on that side, on our side, we can't get it done. But we figure if they can work something out on the House, when they come over, then they give us a bargain chip, a second shot at the game. And it's that because we picked those seats up in the House, and they are doing a great job. Say, hey, we're gonna get some over to y'all. Just hold on. So we're holding on, hoping that these guys can get some over to us.
And Delegate Lindsey, as a member of the House Appropriations Committee, you are always wrestling with balancing these competing interests: education, healthcare, public safety. I take it that's still a very difficult task.
Well, and I'm no longer on appropriations. I'm on
That's
commerce
too
and
bad.
labor, and I'm on finance. So, but I'll tell you, the real challenge is about funding the initiatives, and looking at how to balance the budget, in the process. This is, Medicaid expansion is not something that, in my opinion, is optional. I think it is something that's time is right. I think it is a situation where we have to really realize that we do our constituents a disservice when $6 million a day is leaving the Commonwealth in terms of taxes that have been paid and going to other states simply because we can't wrap our heads around this concept that it's about serving our own constituents. It's about getting away from partisan bickering and really appreciating that this is an opportunity. We talk about balancing our budget. I think $6 million a day will go a long ways towards balancing a budget. So.
What about the argument, Delegate Heretick, that you can't count on the federal government's largesse? It's been reduced from 100% to 90%. That was anticipated under the Affordable Care Act, but the opponents always argue, what if that disappears? They keep increasing the deficit and the long-term debt in Washington.
Well, Woody, that's always a risk, but I mean, look at it this way. They could cut our Defense Department budget tomorrow. They could cut our federal highway funding tomorrow. There are any number of streams of revenue that we as a Commonwealth depend on to operate day by day that they could cut tomorrow. But we don't act like on highways and defense and those other areas, education. We don't pretend like that's going to go away tomorrow, because we expect that if Washington's going to do that sort of thing, we and our public will have a lot of opportunity to put some input into that process, to have some say-so in that process. I think we have to treat healthcare exactly like we treat funding for highways, education, the military, and all those other federal programs. We have to assume that it's going to be there. We have to take advantage of it. And I take small exception to what Senator Spruill said a minute ago. It's not free money, it is our money.
I agree.
It is money that, our taxpayers, you and I, have paid to the federal government that they want to pay us back. And I think it frustrates all of us that when we reject that money, over $2 billion a year, billion with a B, that money goes to other states, many of whom are run by Republicans, who are happy to take Virginia's money to afford health care for their citizens. And for us to bypass that money, I think for nothing more than political gain, I think that's doing a disservice to our citizens, and I think that we have to look to those funds as a stable source. Like I tell people, I don't care if we can give people health care for 10 years, 10 months, or 10 minutes. As long as we can get those people health care that they need, it's our job to do it.
And Woody, I'll tell you, I was in a finance subcommittee meeting this morning, and the issue was about tax credits, and also it spoke to whether or not we should exempt feminine products from being taxed.
Right, the Dignity Act.
The Dignity Act, that's being advanced by Delegate Borsko. And one of the things that was mentioned by one of the members was, well, this is $4 million in a year. And we're going to lose $4 million from our budget if we do it. Well, if we are able to get around the partisan wrangling and we embrace Medicaid expansion, that's $6 million per day. $6 million per day, $4 million a year. To me, the math is easy on that one.
And also the point as far as being shut down, look at the government right now. They're trying to keep the government being shut down right now. So that could happen, but nothing right. So what they're trying to piecemeal right now to keep the government being shut down. your Social Security check, anything that goes to Washington, D.C. is always a threat at some time. So they can give us another 100 days, whatever they can try to pass to keep the government being shut down. It's a possibility. So is it safe now, what we have now? No. So that's why they can't use that thing, how long it's going to last. How long are those who get checks from the federal government who depend on the U.S. Congress to do the right thing to get their check remarked?
And of course, this problem is, this Medicaid expansion for 400,000 people is highlighted at least once a year in Wise, Virginia, where they have the remote access clinic and people line up overnight, sleeping in their cars to get medical attention.
And I hate to say it this way, I think that a lot of Virginia, especially the other side, the other side, they seem to think that they want to tie it to the Affordable Care, Obamacare. That seems to scare a lot of people on the Republican side. It's like they're trying to do something, say, you're not punishing him, the man's president. They ain't got nothing to do with that. But they seem to think that because the idea come from while he was president, the idea come from Washington, D.C., they seem to think there's a tie to that. I said, it's not. I said, it's not. It's money that you say that we paid for already, not giving you. You correct me right. So a lot of folks seem to think there's Obamacare. I said, it's not Obamacare. You know, it's tax money that you already paid into it. And so you said something about sleeping in cars. We had up there in the western part of the state, talking about the Medicare expansion now, Obamacare and ACA. And they mixed it from 1 to 10. They mixed the numbers on both sides. And they hated Obamacare. They loved the Affordable Care Act. And it's the exact same thing. And I said to myself, don't get that mixed up with this money. You see? And that's a problem. So are you really doing this because you had a black president? Are you really doing it because it's the wrong thing to do? So my concern was, yes, you could lose it 10 years from now. But it's 10 years from now that we can use that money for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And when you retire from the federal government, every time we talk about shutting the government down, they get nervous, those who are in the service. Am I going to get my check because now they're playing games for some reason and I'm in the service and my check can be good. It could shut down, it could not. So we're saying it's taxpayers' money. Let's use it for the best for Virginia. Make sure that 400,000 people have some type of insurance. If it ain't more for 10 minutes, as he just got through saying.
And of course, Delegate Lindsey, you and Delegate Heretick are wrestling with this phenomenon that was created by this tax cut recently in Washington, which resulted in a significant amount of non-withholding revenues coming into the coffers of the state of Virginia at the end of last year. And I take it caution is the byword because we don't really know what impact that will have on the state of Virginia this year.
Certainly, we're looking at a lot of change in the tax code, and whenever the federal tax laws change, we have to change our tax code here in Virginia to match or to be in sync. Right now, there are things that many would argue really put a greater burden on the middle class. There are tax cuts for the wealthier of our citizens, and we're trying to take stock of what's happening in Washington, sync our tax code here in Virginia, but also have compassion and understanding for the burden that some of these tax breaks require on many of our lower class and middle class.
And of course, those individual tax cuts are temporary versus the corporate tax cuts, which are permanent.
And that's a huge problem, Woody. I mean, I think that Washington loves these sort of gimmicks where, you know, they act like they're giving folks like you and me a tax break, when what they're really doing is giving a tax break to the top 1%. And then they're kind of throwing the crumbs at us, so we'll support it. And, you know, I think we in Virginia understand that, you know, gimmicks in Washington shouldn't work in Richmond at all. You know, Joe and I serving on finance, we understand, you know, how difficult it is to tax evenly, to tax fairly, to make the decisions we make so that our colleagues in the appropriations side who decide where the money goes has the resources to run the Commonwealth. You know, nobody wants to pay more taxes. Everybody wants a tax cut. But at the same time, everybody wants enhanced services. Everybody wants their teachers to make more money. Everybody wants their police and firefighters to make more money. It's natural. But, you know, we're kind of caught in the middle between, you know, what I would consider to be Washington gamesmanship and the reality of life here on the ground in Richmond.
You've got some legislation that has caused some interest, tethering of animals.
Yes, sir. And what happens is that it's concerned about.
By the way, I'm not going to be able to co-patron that with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. What happened was it's concerned about the you would tell them changes of animals and out in the cold. And what they were saying, hey, that in some homes that don't do that during the winter time, have some place for them to go it, either the house outside, and they were saying that they get caught in the change, and it's cold, the water get frozen out. And we were saying that because of that, know that when it gets cold, put them somewhere where it can't be cold. And so the bill got out of the committee, but we had to exclude hunting animals and agricultural animals. So I'm saying, what's the difference? So the guy was saying, my killing is this, I got warm water and this stuff on. I said, that's fine, you may have that, but what about the next person? So we made it so at least that those homeowners who got a dog chained around the neck, know, hey, when it gets cold, that you got to put that dog somewhere up, somewhere where it's warm, and have a chain long, at least 15 feet, where you can get to some water, what have you. And so that's what it is. We're talking about cruelty to animals for those that, if you got one, if you can't take care of an animal properly, do not have one. I didn't realize that you had all that kind of problem with taking care of animals, you see. So don't know anything about hunting, but we'll see. They got other committees. So today is on sucker reading day done, and they told me, be ready tomorrow, Spruill. We're going to come at you tomorrow, on the floor tomorrow, about tethering them animals.
Delegate Lindsey, we've got about a minute and a half left. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King and what's going on in the legislature about those kinds of issues.
Well, this is an opportunity to really highlight a remarkable person and all of what his sacrifice has done to make life more in the way of opportunity for people of color. And you know, and I can absolutely say to you that it has been a particular challenge for me as a member of the General Assembly on the celebrated birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, because that is also the day that the gun lobbyists and the gun rights folks always come in with their guns saddled and they talk about their rights to bear arms and they bring them in the chambers, they bring them into our offices and the like. And I remember when I first got here, that was a matter of great consternation for me, because I felt like it was so incredibly disrespectful. I felt like there were, we're in session 45 to 60 days. There were any number of days that they could come up, as so many lobby groups do come up, but they were choosing this. But at the same time, I had to put that aside and just realize that I had to stay focused on the end game. And I think that this is that opportunity.
Well, thank you all for being here. Delegate Steve Heretick, Delegate Joe Lindsey, and Senator Spruill. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, sir.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.